You know, when we think of Anne Frank, we often see the big picture. But today, we're going to zoom way, way in on a single painful argument. An argument that you'd think would have broken her, but instead, it became the very thing that sparked her most profound growth.
It's a huge question, right? Well, for Anne Frank, a teenager hiding for her life, the answer was a resounding yes. We're about to see how one absolutely devastating clash of words actually forced a transformation that would ripple through every single page of her diary. So, to really get this, you have to picture the scene. The secret annex wasn't just some hiding spot. It was an intense, claustrophobic pressure cooker. You've got 8 people crammed into a few tiny rooms, terrified of being discovered at any moment. Every little annoyance, every personality difference, it was all magnified 1,000 times over. And in that pressure cooker, conflict came in different flavors. You had Mr. Van Pels, who might argue loudly, get it all out. But Mrs. Van Pels, her approach was totally different. Her words weren't just loud, they were sharp, they were targeted, they were like a surgeon's scalpel designed to slice right through you. And Anne was more often than not the target.
Yeah, we are not talking about little spats over who gets to use the bathroom first. No way. The fights between Anne and Mrs. Van Pels were full-blown emotional storms, and they always left Anne feeling completely humiliated and just simmering with rage.
And then, the breaking point. During one particularly vicious argument, Mrs. Van Pels just unleashed on Anne. But she didn't just criticize her, she did it in front of everyone. She publicly branded her with these words: selfish, childish, troublesome. I mean, just imagine being a teenager, already stripped of everything, and having those labels thrown at you.
For any kid, being shamed in public is devastating. But for Anne, who is already so sensitive, so insecure, this attack was a deep, deep wound. It felt like a total betrayal, like someone was telling her that her entire existence was wrong, and she had a front-row audience for it.
And here's the absolute kicker. There was no escape. She couldn't storm out of the room and slam the door. She couldn't go for a walk to cool off. The echoes of those words, selfish, childish, they just hung in the air she had to breathe, every minute of every hour. The humiliation was just inescapable.
It really could have, right? An attack that personal in a situation that hopeless, it could have completely shattered anyone's spirit. But this, right here, is where the story takes this incredible turn. The very moment that was designed to break her, instead began to build her.
So what happened? Well, being pushed into that emotional corner, Anne only had one place left to go: inward. She started using all that quiet, tense time to turn the incident over and over in her mind. But she wasn't just replaying the hurt, she was analyzing it, like a puzzle, questioning her own flaws, her strengths, and the real nature of these relationships. And all that thinking led to this staggering realization, a huge leap in her maturity. She started to see the adults around her, even her tormentor, Mrs. Van Pels, not as these all-knowing judges, but for what they really were: flawed, terrified, and irritable people, cracking under impossible pressure, just like she was.
And there it is. That is the absolute core of this transformation. That awful argument became a crucible. The intense heat of that anger and humiliation didn't destroy her. It forged something new. It literally reshaped her entire view of herself and her tiny, cramped world.
And where did she do all this hard work? In her diary, of course. Kitty became more than just a friend. It became her workshop. It was the one place she could take that argument apart, piece by piece, challenge every accusation, and start to rebuild her own identity, on her own terms, completely separate from the labels they tried to stick on her.
You can actually see this incredible journey in her writing. It starts with that deep introspection, looking at her own role and trying to figure out what made other people tick. That leads to this amazing emotional independence, where their judgments just don't hit as hard. From there, she starts reclaiming who she is. And the result? She comes out of it stronger and more self-aware than ever. So what's the big takeaway for us? The lessons here are just so powerful. First, what other people say about you, it doesn't have to define you. Anne saw that Mrs. Van Pels's words were really about her own fear, not about Anne. Second, you can learn to trust your own inner voice. For Anne, writing gave her clarity and confidence. And maybe most important of all, even the absolute worst hardships can be the very things that help us grow the most.
Which really leaves us with one final thought. Anne Frank's story proves that sometimes our most formative, most important moments are born from our most painful conflicts. It kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? If you look back on your own life, what are the arguments that didn't break you, but instead kind of unexpectedly reshaped you?